Welcome back to the Unanimous Decision Podcast. I'm your host, DPalm. Follow me on Twitter at DPalm66. Follow the show on Twitter at UDPod. Follow the entire MTR Network on Twitter at the MTR Network. We give you a very unique spin on all the things you love, including but not limited to comic books, television, movies, politics, and of course now sports. Now that you find us, make sure you don't lose us. Leave a 5-star review in the iTunes store under the UD Pod feed to have all your words right on the air. Subscribe to the UD Pod feed. I know some of you are saying, hey, DPalm, I'm on the main MTR feed. I'll get to you when I get to you. If you're a diehard UD Pod listener, if you want to make sure everything you're talking about is most up to date as possible, subscribe to the unique UD Pod feed. That way, you're sure to not miss anything. Occasionally, I'll be dropping some midweek episodes. I'll be dropping some bonus content. You want to make sure you're up to date on all of it? Follow us, not just on Twitter, but also on iTunes. Subscribe to the UD Pod there. Also, at the MTR Network, if you're a black woman with a business or event that you want promoted for free, email us at bwbusiness@mtrnetwork.net. Hashtag Black Woman Shoutout. It's a project that Chris spearheaded last year that's been just super rewarding for us here at the network. It's a great way for us to show and shout out people who deserve it. And also, now that you've found all this great content into our network, toss us, a little money. Because you know what? The best way to get more content is to pay for the content you get. The best way to do that is to subscribe to our premium network, $8 a month, over 300 individual unique podcasts. Once that individual podcast has 5 episodes, it'll get its own feed. Your feed's already up for Hell No Cupid, the dating show that I'm going to appear on this year prior to the wedding. And when I tell you it's a hilarious ride with Chris as you watch him hack his way through the world of online dating, it really is a sight to behold. It makes me appreciate what I've got even more. All right, that's all the business for the day out of the way. Our guest today is a former classmate of mine from high school. It's a guy who, so when you talk to people from your past, they generally become that person they were for you then. This gentleman who I'm about to speak to is always, in my mind, been probably my favorite high school basketball player. But the way digital media works now, the way social media works now, I've been able to keep up with his life from afar and watch him take this journey that, honestly, I didn't see coming, but I couldn't be more happier for him and happier for me to get to watch it and kind of experience it vicariously. We've got Stephen Satterfield here, the owner, curator, and developer of Whetstone magazine. What's up, man?
What's going on?
Not a whole lot. Thanks for taking the time out of Labor Day week, or Memorial Day weekend, I should say, to sit down with us. But I thought it was, you launched the week, I think Whetstone launched, this week, correct?
Yeah, we just had our official launch in New York on Thursday.
That's awesome, man. And it's something I wanted to have you on because I guess we kind of talked before the show, but it's wild because you've got this whole new life. And for me, you're still a lifetime ago as high school basketball player at Satterfield. And I know it's got to be wild for you to even hear that because for me, when people say, hey, where'd you play ball? I'm like, oh, I played ball. And I have to think the last time I played any football was my last college game 10 years ago. So for you, It's got to be wild. It's the wildest thing in the world, right?
I mean, yeah. In other words, I feel old. No, I think you're probably the person who's ever said I was their favorite high school basketball player. It makes me really feel something. I don't think any of us could have really predicted, a decade or more out of high school or college. Well, maybe some of the folks we went to school with, but life is very unpredictable. And I'm just happy to have been able to.
Yeah, you're 100% right. So Whetstone, so those who don't know, Whetstone is a digital and print publication on food origin and culture. You can visit them at whetstonemagazine.com. Steve, take a just kind of abbreviated version, but how did we go from my favorite high school basketball player to someone who is being a leading voice in the development of the food culture?
Well, I mean, it became clear to me that I wasn't going to play college basketball as I was not recruited for any major school. And I really wanted to leave the region and experience something completely different after high school. I had not traveled very much up to that point, so I decided to move to Oregon, of all places, I didn't know much about Oregon. I knew that it was on the coast, that it had many different landscapes. It had a lot of trees, of all kinds. And I just thought like it would be far enough where I would have to really find myself as a young man. And, luckily those instincts proved to be true. I really enjoyed my time out there. I went to the University of Oregon, so I was a Duck. So I was there during the Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart era where they used to stomp on us every year. But watching Reggie Bush in college was just one of the coolest things ever. He was so electrifying in real life. So I had like kind of a good mix of traditional, big college experience, but also the campus was really beautiful, very laid back, not like parts of the culture of college football that I might be less comfortable with per se. And so after I did that for a couple years, I went to culinary school in Portland, because I was really into food and beverage as a culture. I started studying wine at the age of 20. I became a sommelier, which is basically a professional wine drinker. Oftentimes people who work in restaurants who help the diners choose the best wine for whatever they're having for dinner. So I did that for a few years. I learned about wine. Decided that there's a lot of bullshit and racism in the wine industry, like you see in many other industries. Sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. And so basically I became more attracted to the workers of the wine industry, the laborers of the wine industry, and really the history, like how we were mainly just looking at wine through a very narrow lens of refinement and privilege. And really, it's a shared global culture. And in many parts of the world, it's enjoyed in a lot more humble fashion. And certainly the people who are making the wine are nothing like the image that's projected on the wine industry. So
I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah.
How much did our scholastic experience in like high school inform that? Because hearing you tell that story, and again, this is the first time we've caught up in years. It echoes kind of the sensibilities that I left Westminster with. Is kind of like, I've seen the other side. I've seen the celebrations of this excess in such a way that it's almost turns your stomach to it, that you become more sensitive and more seeking this something more. I don't want to say real, because reality is subjective. By you're real as you can be, but it felt like it was almost more grounded.
Yeah, like it was very disorienting. I didn't grow up with money, and going to the school that we went to, Westminster, it was a very hyper competitive place in terms of academics, yes, but underlying that, the real thing that I was more so confronted with was the ostentatious wealth and the obsession with money and status, especially for someone that didn't have really either one. And so I definitely felt insecure about that. And as I grew into my own skin as a young man, instead of just feeling idle or victimized by the insecurities, I use it as a way to learn more, and find solace in knowing that many people historically have felt the same insecurities and also done things with their career to try to create opportunities and help other people feel less insecure.
That's really dope. So you mentioned that in learning more about the history and kind of the narrow lens with which we viewed these, I guess, emerging markets of wine connoisseurship. What did you find in your studies that led you open up your own personal lens?
I ended up starting this nonprofit called the International Society of Africans in Wine. It's a mouthful, but I saw a foundation. I think I was like 25 or something, in 2008, I think, with another one of our former classmates, PJ Bullock's one of my best friends. So we started this organization together with a mission to use viticulture, which is the practice of growing grapes for the production of wine, in South Africa, to help Black farmers or Black winery owners. And this is kind of on the tail end of a post-apartheid initiative. A lot of winery owners, wine is a major industry in South Africa, multi-billion-dollar industry. It was founded by the Dutch colonists in the 17th century. So there's been a long and uninterrupted period of winemaking in South Africa. But the labor force is about 95+% Black or indigenous, not Black in the way that we think of it.
Right.
And they have, at that time, there was only 2 Black families who owned any of the land in the entire country in terms of the viticultural land. And so as a sommelier in the States, I felt very conflicted about selling these wines from South Africa, knowing the crazy inequity of ownership or lack thereof based on, the politics there, which are very similar to our own history. I saw, the South and cotton and these stories of redlining in exactly the South African apartheid. So we started trying to create market access for winemakers in South Africa, help them import their wines to the States, promote their wines, market their wines, and which is very complicated, but I won't even get into why. But basically, in telling those stories and writing about them and using multimedia to help raise money on their behalf, that kind of opened my eyes up to this lane of advocating for farm workers and using media as a way to really share larger ideas around, just how people are living in and around agricultural land.
That's super dope, because you've taken not just something that was your passion and made it your life. You've found a way to really affect positive change through it. And without, blowing any smoke at all, I want you to know that, like, people like me are paying attention to that stuff. Because, like, for me, I fell ass backwards into podcasting. And it's something that I found out that I'm good at, and found out that I have a passion for, found out people, for some reason, want to listen to what I say. Please don't stop listening, guys. But it's cool because kind of just watching you gave me, and that, like, I don't think I won't lie here and be like I lack for confidence. I'm not gonna tell a lie on this podcast. But
no one will believe you.
It did give me kind of that not last little, but like it was one of those foots in the asses, like, yo, go do something. It was like watching someone that be such a transformative figure, or even aspire to be so. It's something that's like, it's one of those big ethoses for me, is be a why not person. Like, so much in your life, you say, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to start a podcast. People hit you with why do you want to do that? Why would someone listen to you? And you were kind of an exemplar of a why not person, of someone who said, why not me? Why not affect the change? Why not take this shot on something I care about and send a message about something that matters to me? And so, before we get far into anything, I want to say thank you for just kind of being out there and standing out. And tell me how you went from the I Saw Foundation into this launch that just occurred for the Whetstone magazine.
Well, I really appreciate that, bro. Like, really. I think that it's very crucial that people understand that the things that we want in life are not going to be brought into our life until we first believe that we have the capacity to bring them there. So, and definitely anyone who knows me is like, if this fool can do it, then I can definitely do it. So, but yeah, I mean, that journey, basically, I moved to California, after the sort of dissolution of the nonprofit. We were a 501c3, charity, so we were tax exempt, and we lost a lot of our funding after the 2008 crisis. So we were able to make it through the World Cup in 2010, which was a great time for the campaign and the organization. But I was very burned out as a founder and trying to raise money in a difficult period. Also, we started a wine club. We saw this shift coming, but we really couldn't do much to get ahead of it. We had already created a direct consumer wine club But because each state has such different and convoluted alcohol laws, which have somewhat been relaxed now, but at that time were really still much more difficult, and people weren't really into internet commerce. I honestly think we were just a little early. No Kickstarter, no Instagram, stuff like that, I think would have really been a lot more transformative in terms of us being able to spread that message. But anyway, so yeah, after that, I moved to California and kind of just hooked into the restaurant community, local food community out there. I managed a restaurant, a really regarded restaurant called Nopa for a few years. Their mission is basically using their buying power as a large and important restaurant to support local farmers. And so we had a lot of alignment in that work I was doing with South Africa and their mission. And after doing the management there for a few years, kind of just did the same thing I was doing, with the nonprofit, which is documenting the beneficiaries or the farm workers or the little guys, however you want to look at, those narratives. And it became my full-time job. So I transitioned from running restaurants into doing media for the organization or for the restaurant group. I started a platform called Nopalize, which is like a multimedia HQ for all the restaurants. So it wasn't really about our restaurants per se. It was about our restaurant culture. They gave me a monthly budget to trade in food and drink. And I went out and built a team of creative talent in the Bay Area's writers, filmmakers, photographers, everything. And we built this little network about our local food culture, built a pretty good following with that. And after a while, the owners were just kind of like, yo, you need to take this to the next level. Like, we're a restaurant, we've given you this platform, we support you, but you're ready to go out on your own. And I'm so glad that they gave me that push, because that's eventually what happened. I mean, Whetstone is basically a continuation of this celebration of local food culture, but it's got a much more international look. So this first edition has stories from Marrakesh, Colombia, South Africa, Oaxaca, Mexico. So looking at local food culture from a more global lens.
That's dope. Yeah, if you guys don't know, now that you're hearing about this, make sure you follow him on Instagram, because you get to see kind of how this magazine get built. Because, like, I grind, I got the 9 to 5 or whatever. I do this as my passion, and I love it, and this is going to be what's next for me. But it's so cool to watch you and watch the team travel and experience all these different cultures and just live vicariously through your pictures.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about Instagram, like, definitely don't want to feel like I'm flexing or trying to create some image of, a charmed life. Like, I sleep on plenty of couches. Living and making media on the road is, there's a real sacrifice. There's a lot to be said for the stability of waking up in the same bed every night, having a stable job and paycheck and all that. So it's definitely not my intention, but of course, in the midst of traveling and making this kind of content, you just encounter such rich people and stories and visuals that, I love sharing that stuff.
And plus, be honest with me, the food's really dope, right?
Yeah, and I'm obsessed with food. So there's a lot of images of food, and my Instagram is in many ways a big celebration of food.
Well, that's what's up, man. Well, I really do appreciate you taking the time. Like I said, like we're MTR Network, like we're a small DIY operation too, and in watching you just kind of take those next steps, it emboldens the hell out of us and hell out of me, and I hope it does it for our listeners too. Let's talk about a couple of sports things that are going on in the world today. You mentioned that you were able to take your passion and take your love of the winery culture and kind of use it towards a social good, and that's kind of what we do here. I've had people tell me that I shouldn't talk about X, Y, or Z. I'm like, nah, that's kind of what the show is, so if you don't like it, don't listen. But I do want to revisit a story from last week. The Texas discriminatory Jim Crow for transsexual people law is getting closer to getting passed in Texas. And for those who missed us last week, it's essentially a law. It's a bathroom law in the same vein of HB2 in North Carolina, where essentially it's making you illegal as a person for being who you are by controlling where you can use the restroom. People say, oh, it's just the bathroom. Oh, I'll just grin and bear it. No, no, no. That's not how societies work. That's not how rights work. You don't grin and bear it when people take away your rights. You get loud and you get active about it. And that's something that happened with HB2. Over 2 years, North Carolina acquiesced, gave up, were willing to spike themselves to the tune of over $500 million in lost revenue from All-Star games and lost championships from NCAA. But now that it's been at least verbally rescinded, the teams are starting to come back. And by verbally rescinded, anyone who's followed the HB2 law knows that this rescission isn't true. It's all full of conditions, and it's only happening over a certain course of time. But the NBA, the leaders in performative social justice, have decided to award Charlotte the 2019 All-Star Game. Stephen, I know you're kind of like, you're probably pretty removed from this, but just in a vacuum, this seems pretty damn tone deaf, especially as further measures are being taken in other states.
It does. I think performative is probably the right word. I think, what the NBA has very cleverly learned, which is what many organizations learn, is if you get in front of it, if you say, we're handling this right now, here's the steps that have been taken, then it's business as usual because we're on to the next thing. We feel like there's been some resolution there when that's not always the case.
And it's wild that I'm able to sit up here and praise the NCAA, but they've awarded they've brought nothing back to the state because they don't believe that the repeal is real. And I think you're right. I think that in this race to win the PR war, and trust me, I'm one of those people who says, I'll deal with motives later. I need you doing the right thing first. So I'll be the first one to tip my cap for them pulling the All-Star game, but you've got to cast that same eye of distrust, like you said, because you're right, being at the forefront, being the first, being the one who stepped in front of that first bullet makes you look, it's a great PR move, but what are you really doing afterwards? And I think that's where the NBA is falling short here, particularly in the awarding of this All-Star game. An issue that's near and dear to my heart is the recent move of the Braves ballpark to Cobb County. If you've listened to this show for the last, 45 episodes, you know that I'm not a fan of this. I think that it's institutional racism on its face and at any level. You have to drive over Lester Maddox Bridge to get to the stadium, for God's sakes. And now, as I pointed out repeatedly, this has been a stadium deal that was so crooked that it had all of Cobb County, from the Tea Partiers to the furthest left people there, united against the way they did it. A lot of backroom deals, a lot of handshakes that happened before even being brought to a vote for the county. Actually avoided a vote altogether. They found a way to bilk the county for a county that's losing teachers, that's losing school systems, that's losing arts programs into paying for the stadium. And now the $400 million they paid is not enough because they are now going to be bilking the taxpayers out of more. So the deal that brought Cobb County, the stadium of Cobb County, the burden for paying for law enforcement outside the stadium will fall on the taxpayers of the team. For those who follow this sort of thing, the Braves have paid for their own police presence outside the stadium for the last 8 years, but now that they've moved, the Cobb County residents are on the hook for $900,000 per year to pay for the 40 officers who work each home game. And it's only going to get worse over the course of the 30-year contract with the team in the county. This is from the AJC. Those salary averages don't include an already approved pay increase or any future wage increases over the next 3 decades, the life of the county's contract with the Braves. The estimated cost per game is $11,066. Post-game concerts and postseason games and concerts, like Billy Joel last month and Metallica in July, cost extra and will cost the same. Now, Stephen, this is obviously a state of corporate greed that just continues to run amok. We've talked about stadiums being bad deals for cities, but is this just taking the money for police officers when you're increasing taxes on parks and losing schools? Is this just America distilled into one county and one stadium?
Yes, in one word.
Because the more I do, because I want to talk about specifically Cobb County, specifically Atlanta, and sort of the fraud dynamics of it. But as you read it, the more you're like, oh, this is just America.
I mean, this is just the jig, man. Obviously, like you said, there's so much data to suggest that, these deals are almost always bad for taxpayers and for cities. But with the underlying dynamics for people who know or from Atlanta, the racial composition of the old stadium versus, Cobb County, and just what it represents, I think, for the brand of Atlanta Braves, the ownership group, and what sort of brand or image they wanted to be more aligned with. It wasn't where the old stadium was. And in a lot of ways, I think it really just came down to that, their fan base. Let's face it, the neighborhood did not reflect their fan base. And so I think in many ways, it was a business decision, but part of that business was the underlying, racial composition and socioeconomic condition of where that neighborhood was.
And just so y'all know, we're not blowing smoke. This is a region of Atlanta that has repeatedly turned down MARTA expansion because, and I'm quoting a former Cobb County commissioner here, they didn't want them in their county. You can fill in the them where you feel it applies. Just kind of like I said, getting ready for the show, I want to talk about Atlanta specific, but the Raiders Stadium has now turned into the most expensive boondoggle in the history of stadiums in America. It's going to end up costing about $1.9 billion. And while you say, wow, the Raiders sure seem to be fitting a lot of that money, they really aren't. $750 million being granted by public subsidy. It's the largest public grant ever given in America. And Clark County will soon be floating a bond to raise all that money and raising hotel taxes on the Strip by 0.88% in order to pay back their debt holders. And something you should know about state subsidies, even when the money comes from tourist taxes or general fund, the opportunity cost of losing where this tax money should be going to. Vegas is a region in a city largely predicated on tourism. When you take the money from tourism and say, we're not going to give it to schools or after-school programs or drug programs or things that the community directly needs, hell, Gambling Anonymous. You're going to say we're going to use that money instead to build a stadium that's going to be filled, for the most part, with tourists. That's the crazy little the sneaky story about Vegas' football team is there won't be Raiders fans in that stadium. Vegas is already a destination. Who's going to be more excited for those 8 home games? The people who live in Las Vegas, or the people who drive or fly from Oakland, or the people who say, hey man, I'm a Falcons fan, but I can get a Vegas weekend out of this too. I'm more attractive on the secondary market than a long-term Raiders fan. And that means they're going to have the first team in NFL history play 16 road games, or at best, 8 road and 8 neutral site.
Yeah, and I live in Oakland too, and I can tell you, Oakland are sad. I've never heard of like a city losing a franchise, or they felt so aligned, especially with Marshawn and everything. I mean, obviously he's coming back for this last year, but the people of Oakland really, really, they mess with the Raiders, and they're bummed out. So to know that they're going to have only basically road games, neutral games, is even more depressing because they have a real live committed base.
But that dollar conquers all. And just so you know, the dollar conquers all. How thirsty was Vegas to get this stadium? Clark County has forfeited the right to collect any rent, solicit property taxes, or collect additional revenue streams from the stadium they're shelling out $750 million to build.
Wow.
Like if they run other concerts in that stadium, which they will do, the city, the county gets none of that money.
Ridiculous.
But people want to say, I got an NFL team. Vegas, you're already an attraction, baby. They're going to have live gambling in the stands. They already have that. That's what cell phones are for. I don't see... I get it, because I'm not going to pretend like I'm obtuse enough to say, I don't know why they made the move. I get why they made the move. They saw a money-making opportunity and decided to do the fastest grab they could. I just think that it's so unsustainable that everyone kind of notices.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, a couple of years ago when Mark Cuban was ridiculing the NFL on Twitter, said that basically they're not going to be relevant in the next decade if they continue with their level of arrogance. I think it's, he might be onto something when they do stuff like this. It's super short-sighted.
It's crazy to me. Also crazy to me, other stadium news, we're going to stay in the business of sports for a second. Massive rainfall has delayed the LA I guess Rams and Chargers Stadium from opening in 20, it's supposed to be opening early 2020, and because you cannot have a stadium open the same season as hosting a Super Bowl, they've now lost their Super Bowl and now moving the Super Bowl to lovely Tampa Bay, Florida. One, that your plan gets thrown off by rain worries me. Two, that you're now sticking two teams in a 30,000 seater stadium that you couldn't fill up last year. That's not good for LA football, because one of the things about moving these teams to LA was that you're going to build a brand, you're going to build a consciousness that's going to be a 30-year, 40-year proposition, a generational type thing. That's how you build a fan base. But if you can't fill in 30,000 seats in your first 2 years, why the hell would a kid who lives in the area glom onto those teams? You got to have something flashy, something that matters, something that can build that interest. And it feels like LA's going over 2 on this.
Yeah.
It just seems like it was poorly thought out. And like you said, the point of the jig is to make the money and have people not realize it. Like that, I thought that was always the point of the jig, like to trick people. It feels like the NFL, in playing off of that quote you read, it just feels like they're just scrambling and grabbing every dollar they can at this point.
I mean, it really just comes down to at what point is the dilution of the product and the experience for the fans going to affect them financially. And I mean, the thing is, there's so few people who are getting rich off of the, I mean, like wealthy, I guess, not rich. The players getting rich off the NFL products. And so whenever the consumers, us, realize, like, you know, all these moves, like, it's really disorienting or upsetting for us to lose these franchises that we've made connections with the community. The players don't want to be in these markets where they have no relationship to the fan base. You know, it's not good for the fans, so the agent's going to be trying to get their players out of there. The same thing with these Thursday night games. The collective bargaining is a mess for the players. Like, at some point, all of these things will catch up, I think, in a way where, even though our country is obsessed with watching football, when it's like a really terrible product, then it's just not going to be worth it.
Yo, you're 100% right. So, like, before I did this, I was a sports agent. I was an NFL agent. And I didn't even know. I was in the meeting in Indianapolis when they read the new CBA to us and told us about the cap of 3% football-related revenue for agents. And I looked around the room, and what you don't realize is there are more NFL licensed agents than there are NFL players.
Wow.
And so, like, it's mostly people's side hustle. I'm not gonna lie and pretend like there's 1,000 people making a bunch of money, but there's an upper echelon of agents who were able to circumvent those rules and find different ways to break those rules. But it was the CBA being so poorly negotiated is a big issue, and it's something I've always rallied against, because this is the weakest union in sports.
Yeah.
It's a union where the NFL comes through and says, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and the player station's like, well, could you not drug test for weed? They're like, no, we can't do that. We could never sell that. Sign the paper. It's not a negotiation. It's a jack. And it always has been. And it always will be. And until you get some leadership in the NFLPA, and this, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole where I bitch about NFLPA leadership, but until you've got someone who's willing to stand up to the league and say, hey, we're organized, we're ready to negotiate, but we're also coming from a place of we've got these limited windows, that's the only time you're going to see real change. And the problem is you've conditioned these athletes to know that the next play could be their last. The next check could be their last. And it's something that's reinforced. Like, it's something that plays out on a micro and macro level. On a macro level, it is the ownership knowing they've got the players over a barrel because these guys, one, don't spend their money the wisest because of the, lax certification requirements for a contract negotiator in the NFLPA. And also, on a micro level, when you say, why don't guys pull themselves out for concussions, they've been told their whole careers, you miss a play, the next guy will take your job.
Yeah, and I mean, they haven't just heard that. They've seen that happen.
Every day, man. Every day. And I'm as we move to the next topic, I got to be completely honest and transparent with our listeners. So in a couple weeks, we've got on Steve White from SB Nation, former NFL defensive tackle. And he's been one of the leaders and forerunners in the actual film breakdown of Colin Kaepernick's season. I break down film, but he does it at a level that is superior to me. And he can tell you why the levels of throws. And as the time gets longer, the louder the scouts are getting, saying, the things you're saying about this player aren't true. Here are the facts. Part of me wants him not to be signed when Steve comes on because I just kind of want to like cue him up and watch Steve yell for an hour. But rumors this week out of Seattle are that Cap had a good meeting with the Seattle front office. He is excited about Hope potentially being a part of that locker room, and it seems like a good fit. Does this move in Seattle, let's say for the sake of argument, for the sake of the topic, that he does get signed. We know the NFL is going to use this to absolve itself of any sins of what's happened prior. How's the best way you think that we as fans can keep them accountable? Because this is ridiculous.
You mean the way they like shut out Kaepernick?
Well, not even a shutout, because you know what, honestly, and not to be obtuse, I can feel, I get the shutout. I get it intellectually. I get it fiscally. I don't get why they feel they got to lie to us.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could say that this is part of that same thing, the lack of transparency. And it's not even that they're being transparent. They're being really dense. Like they're making the wrong decisions in terms of not communicating openly with their fan base when it just doesn't really make sense for them not to. But so do you think he's going to end up in Seattle? Is that where you're rooting for?
I think that's the one place where he could end up and everything would be copacetic. It's crazy because when you start talking to people, and I spend way too much time online getting called by a nigger by eggs on Twitter, but occasionally you get people who say, people who I might semi-respect in their football opinion come out in this anti-cap stance, and then you start asking questions like, well, here are the numbers. What's wrong with that? Well, he was a distraction for his team. Well, he won the award for most respected in the locker room, and the team seems to love him. Well, he didn't go back. Yeah, he chose to part ways with them because the product they're not putting on a winning football team. Well, and you find my argument's always been, if your objection to him is changing, that means you're lying to me and yourself. And if your objection then becomes, well, the fans aren't going to want this guy on my team. I see when people say that, and I see people, this is being honest, the fans are going to want the distraction. Then you want to say, hey, guys, let's be honest. It didn't affect anything. Like, the numbers weren't down in San Fran. The jerseys sales went through the roof. Why are you lying and telling on yourselves? Because, honestly, they didn't stop watching with Michael Vick. They didn't stop watching when Josh Brown beat his wife in for the Giants. Josh Brown's owner, the owner of the team, the Mayer family, came out this week and said, I got some of the most vitriolic mail I'd ever received regarding Colin Kaepernick. People feel deeply and personally offended by him, and I'm afraid of losing touch with our fans. You didn't seem to care when LT was beating underage prostitutes. You didn't seem to care when you re-signed Josh Brown. But this is where they care. Maybe you should ask yourself, who is being the loudest, and why are they telling on themselves? And why are you letting them tell on you too?
Why are they telling on themselves? Exactly, man. I mean, receipts, like, why were his jersey sales off the hook? He already, it's not a hypothetical, about it being a distraction or not. This already happened.
Yeah, we lived it. Like
we already lived it out.
Year.
Exactly. So, yeah, people say telling themselves.
It's ridiculous and it's disgusting. And I want to stay in Seattle for the next story. Seth Wickersham wrote a piece for ESPN this week where he kind of outlined the division between Seattle's offense and defense, that the defensive players feel a little bit disrespected because they feel like the Russell Wilson-led offense is held up with kid gloves, that he's been made the face of the franchise, but that they really should have won more Super Bowls, and that the heart of this franchise is its defense. It came to a head after the pick to Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl, apparently in OTAs the next year, or maybe getting the year off. It was actually the year after they won the Super Bowl, and they mollywopped Denver, during OTAs. Sherman picked off Wilson, threw the ball at him, and said, "You fucking suck." And so when you see all these anecdotes put together in a story, you're like, these guys don't really like each other. But I played on a football team. I graduated with no shit. My guys in my class, who came in with 28, 7 guys quit, so we graduated with, I think, 21 or 22 guys. There are guys in my 22-man recruiting class I don't speak to. Right. There is one guy in our class who literally hates all of us and doesn't speak to any of us. Shout out to Like he has, for the record, he has a great reason. Like I can't tell the story. I may tell you after the air, but I can't tell you later. But he has a great reason to hate us all. But for me, like having played, having been around teams, having been around like units where one unit was demonstrably better than the other unit, this didn't feel like a real, like they wanted to make it a bigger deal than it was. And of course, they floated Richard Sherman this offseason, and you don't really float Hall of Fame caliber players in their prime. I get all that, but at the same time, like this is kind of how you get down when it's 100 people on or 53 men on the team. They're not all going to get along. Steven, you've been a member of like basketball teams, and you've also, in starting your nonprofit and starting a magazine, larger teams. Do you think that this is more an example of just, one side feels legitimately feels slighted and it's become a wedge, or it's just kind of the cost of doing business with large groups?
I mean, it's 100% the latter, man. Like, especially in football, so much testosterone.
Yeah, there's so much testosterone, especially if I'm on that defense. Like, my career is like 7 years, and you're blowing it with this guy who probably can't play quarterback. Because that was the other like big thing that I guess the piece kind of hung its hat on. And I'm not taking away from the reporting; it's great reporting. I just think that a similar piece can be written about a lot of teams. It's just that they said that that this is a football team that wanted to elevate Russell Wilson to the Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers level. And that the defense always felt the numbers are borne out, that he's not quite on that level. I think that part of it was that they had Russell Wilson on this team-friendly fourth-round money deal, so they were able to get away with not overpaying, but adequately paying for a lights-out defense and a great offensive line. What you've seen happen now is that now they've had to restructure Russie and pay him as commiserate a Super Bowl champion would get. It's affected the rest of the team. How do I mean? So now you've gone from having a dominant offensive line that was highlighted by the toughness of Marshawn Lynch to a literal piecemeal offensive line, an offensive line coach who says, bring me the bodies, I'll make them align. And I think the defensive players are seeing that cost-cutting happening there and saying, well, what's next? It's us.
Well, good on them for reading the news. I mean, they need to start considering what destinations they might be heading to. Yeah, money plays a huge role in sports for the athletes too. I mean, they all know what each other gets paid. Like most offices and stuff we work in, we don't know what our neighbors are getting paid necessarily. Right. And when we find out, we feel some type of way about it oftentimes. Or we're surprised oftentimes when we find out about our coworkers' salaries. But so when you're talking about like that much ego and the stakes are so much higher, especially like endorsement deals could be even more than your entire year's salary. It could carry you into the broadcasting booth after the fact. It could carry you into more commercials, movies after the fact. So that beef over money does manifest itself among these athletes. And I'm not surprised at all. I think you just got to expect it when you're dealing with, that much money.
And particularly football, when the money's, one, not guaranteed, two,
right,
not as high as in other sports, and three, guess what? If I blow up my knee, it's a wrap today. Like that's one of the things that really it hit home for me. And we're talking about when I get to my MVP at the end of the podcast, but everything's so temporary in the NFL. I can't begrudge these guys for saying I got to make hay while the hay is to be made. Otherwise, it's a wrap.
Yeah, same. I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, you said it. It's not guaranteed money, so you have to get the guaranteed money while you can still get it.
So a story that started big, got small, and I think should be bigger is Gisele Bündchen during her interview was talking about her stay-at-home husband Tom Brady, because she makes way more money than him. Everybody needs to realize that. And said that he had concussions almost every year. And the outrage originally, and the NFL's PR team came in and they got the money deal over ESPN and the HBO and said, no. We went to the stats. He's never been reported for one. We talked to Tom. Tom said he's cool. His wife just speaking at turn. And everyone was like, oh, let's just move on. Then not so fast, my friends, because this is indicative of the exact problem she was pointing out. If he did have a concussion, there's no reason for him to tell anyone. None. And you've incentivized, because when you tie things to contracts such as like playing time or starts or yards, or it becomes a financial decision to say, do I want to remember everything in the future, or do I want this money now? And you've seen people like Joe Thomas come out and talk about left tackle for the Browns, say he's already had memory loss. I told this story on the show before, but I don't want to say only. The largest concussion I ever got, I never saw a doctor. We were playing Harvard. We threw a pick. I was covering the pass, and I never saw him coming. My feet ended up above my head. I saw it on film later. Great hit. Clean me clean out. My next clear memory is on the bench getting yelled at by my O-line coach. I turned to my left tackle, and I said, what's he talking about? I said, you missed a block on draw. I said, my last memory was the pick. He said, that was 2 series ago. And I said to him, we never had this conversation.
Wow.
It's baked in. We're told from youth. Don't never let the opponent know you're hurt, and the next guy will take your job. That manifests itself in these guys driving drunk, in these guys making these, like people say, oh, these idiot NFL players, that they lost all their money on risky propositions. The risky proposition is how they got the life they live. Taking that shot, they've been conditioned to say, my best method is to take the shot.
Yeah, and they have more evidence to support that being the right decision than the alternative, than the counter.
Their entire lives have been told the best thing you do in this world is football. Don't let anyone get in the way of you doing this football. If someone has to stop you, they're your enemy. You've got doctors who are evaluating these players who are on the payroll of the teams, who is beneficial to the teams do well. They keep their jobs. They might get a raise. It's so much overlapping and so much problematic bullshit around sports and injuries that I think that if a wife who has nothing to lose goes on television or goes into an interview and says, my husband has concussions, it's important to listen to her more than the NFL.
Yeah, it is. But, I mean, it's inconvenient, though, because, like, we are so obsessed with football. And so how do we reconcile this problem with concussions, you know? Because if we're honest, like we want, obviously, I'm assuming for everyone wants the health and wellness of the players to be paramount, you know, but at the same time, it's just really awkward to keep talking about all these concussions because can you even really play football without somebody getting a concussion? Like
concussion,
it seems
knees, like anything. And it's something we talked about, like I think our second episode of this podcast was titled Safer Cigarettes and how there are none.
Right.
And I want to make sure people know that this is not an anti-football podcast. Again, like I had on Reed Forgrave, who was the author of that piece from GQ, The Concussion Diaries. We covered that. I spoke with Lauren Brill out in Ohio, covered the other side of that story. This is not saying to people that football inherently has to go away. I do believe that's a change. I do believe there's no safe way to do it. But I believe that the more informed, the more we talk about these issues, the better prepared we can be. You've had doctors come out this week, concussion specialists, say they looked at scans of children playing youth football and they gasped audibly. This is a culture that has Friday night tights on television to the point where I think Susan and I, fiance and I, watch a show that comes on before it, and every time it comes on, we're like, no, it's a race to the remote. We refuse to let that sit on television for 2 seconds because it's disgusting, it's nauseating. It makes me feel worse about the world that show exists.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I mean, I watch football too. Obviously, you are a former football player. Like, that's for me. I've just found myself consuming less of it, though.
Yeah.
Because it is just it's too cerebral for me to watch it now because I'm thinking about too many other things, like all the other bullshit we've been talking about, basically that has nothing to do with the actual football. Like, I've just been getting so lost in all this other stuff off the field, the exploitation of the players, the concussions. Like, it just takes a little bit out of the joy of it as a consumer, which, again, is eventually, I think, one day going to affect the bottom line.
I couldn't agree more. It's people getting more and more informed, and I think the NFL could do themselves a great service by at least, like we said, sometimes lip service is what you got to do. Get in front of this. Don't spend the next 20 years denying a link between concussions and football. Like, and not necessarily embrace it, but say, if you can control the story from a PR perspective, if I can control the story, then you have more. Then you know what's being said about you. If you put your head in the sand, they're able to take shots from all directions. And I'm with you. I don't watch football as much as I used to. I watch maybe one college game a week now because I can reconcile getting paid and letting your body be the medium for your art. I get it. I get sometimes there are going to be injuries, but it's kind of what everyone signed up for. At least I feel there's an equitable transfer. College football, I'm to this day, people are like, I hope that kid's okay. I'm like, I hope that kid's insured. Fuck okay. Like,
Right.
his collegiate medical will end in 3 years when he's done playing. It's a wrap. I hope he's got an insurance policy because that kid just lost quality of life in the service of a school that won't identify him as an employee and enumerate him as such. And it's, for me, disgusting. Let's talk about people who I think are adequately enumerated. Let's talk about the sport that I guess kind of is the reason why we reached out to you originally. The NBA Finals are gloriously finally here. How have your thoughts been about these playoffs?
Well, I think LeBron is reminding us why he was unconcerned throughout the course of the year, even when everybody else was concerned. He's really been clever about how he's understood rest to be his, as he's gotten older, like that's his greatest strength is his ability to rest. I know he played a lot of minutes early in the year, but like really down the stretch, he rested on defense a lot, and people were, they do the thing we've been doing every year. Has he lost his stuff, blah, blah, blah. He lost a little bit of explosiveness, but at the same time, I think he's really just been taking it easy, knowing what he needed to do for the playoffs. That being said, I'm really, really, really sorry to say that they're about to take a huge L to the Golden State Warriors.
I love
because it really comes down to that exact thing. He is, when it comes down to the series, the final series, the most competition, the intervals get shorter, and he's not going to have the 9 days off, the 2 weeks off that we saw earlier in the series. And that's going to be the difference. That exact thing is going to be the difference.
I'm not going to so spoilers, there is going to be a special NBA Finals preview dropping on Thursday morning, recording on Wednesday, so before Game 1. I'm not going to step on my preview, but I'm going to say right here, right now, I respectfully disagree about the L they're about to take.
Oh, okay.
I think that an L could occur. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion because, and this is, and we're gonna have this. I'm gonna have so y'all know Chad, my old co-host from Juju Podcast, is gonna be on Wednesday, Thursday morning, and we're both big proponents of Happy LeBronicas. Tis the season.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we call it that is because LeBron's done something I've never seen in the NBA. For the last 7 years, regardless of win, lose, or draw, to win a title, you had to deal with the boss. He's a video game boss. You have to go through him to win a title. And it's gotten unreal. It's gotten, like, the fact that you said that on here. I'm so glad, Steve. Like, because me and Chad are going to agree a lot on Wednesday. I needed that. I did need that. Thank you. I needed the man who resides in Oakland to tell me why these Warriors are going to win. Because when I just, again, high-level view, I'll take Kyrie-Steph matchup. That's going to be a fun matchup. Steph couldn't stop me. High-level view, LeBron has never... The answer to Kevin Durant has always been LeBron James. Always.
True.
Because, and I'll tell you this, here's how you know people... Because for the next week, you're going to hear people equating these two players. They are not equal. And you know why they're not equal? If LeBron James had gone to his second finals in 9 years, we would be murdering him. No one is murdering Kevin Durant. If LeBron James had blown a 3-1 lead in the finals, we would be murdering him. No one's taking shots at the Warriors' throne. And just, get him better luck next year. We're grading this guy on a different level. He's not playing us. He's playing ideas. And that's why I'm
that's
excited.
Real.
Huh?
That's real, man. I mean, the thing is, though, I have to say, LeBron has been my favorite player. I've been rocking with LeBron since high school.
I'm right with you.
We graduated from high school the same year. Like, I watched him come up. We're the same age. So he's long been my favorite player. And watching him get to the finals all these years and just the amount of hate, just the dude is so smart, honestly. Everything we've been talking about, his basketball skills is amazing. It's so incredible to watch what he's done on the business side, too. Staying out of trouble. Like, he really does not get enough credit for how he's handled himself and his career and his level of talent. So in my mind, he's not chasing anybody. He's that dude forever, always. See, so I love LeBron.
That's what's up, man. I feel the same way. I'm stopping myself now because I don't want to step on this show later this week. But
yeah.
I'm right. I'm 100% with you right now, my dude. Like this LeBron thing. And, my best argument is, so when do you think it stops? And no one has an answer because we're in year 14. And for people to say, oh, so down LeBron year, he had the most rebounds and most assists per game that he's ever recorded. Ever.
Wow.
This is a guy who, at 38, could go run the point somewhere for like the veterans minimum. And his game, like he doesn't have to have the athletic gifts. He sees the court so well. He could play till he's 40.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like
No
roll him to the
significant
point,
injuries.
get a new piece in Cleveland, let Kyrie go and keep Love as that. Like you can rebuild around LeBron for the next 10 years, which is why I think this offseason is going to be so interesting. Like what does Boston do? Because if you're playing for the next 2-3 years, you're only playing for second. Like you've got to plan out 10 years down the line because this dude doesn't seem like he's going anywhere, and he may actually be getting better. People want to say that, and again, I'm stepping on the show, and I'm going to kick myself for repeating this shit. I don't care. People say that, oh, LeBron broke Jordan's score record. Well, Jordan did it in fewer games. LeBron did it in 120 fewer shots.
There you go. The efficiency. Yeah, those Miami years.
But he cleans out, like, it's so funny. People want to go to points, and LeBron and famously states he's not a scorer. Well, Jordan, you ask him that question at any point in his life, I am the scorer. And he still was more efficient doing it than that. The title of Wednesday's episode is Happy LeBronica because it's the time of year every year that we get LeBron James in our lives for about 7 nights. And I couldn't be happier. Steve, man, thank you for coming on. Will you please tell everyone where to find you and to learn more about Whetstone?
Yes, thanks for having me, man. This is super fun. You can find me on all over the internet at I Saw Stephen. That's STEPHEN. And you can check out Whetstone Magazine. That's WHETSTONE magazine.com. Or follow us on Instagram at Whetstone Magazine. And we will ship anywhere in the world. Learn about where the things we eat and drink come from. Indigenous culture, indigenous people, all comes back to food.
I can vouch, man. I just signed up, and you're going to be delivering to Decatur, Georgia very, very, very soon.
All right, that's what's up.
Thank you for coming on, man. I really do appreciate it. This has been Unanimous Decision Podcast. I'm your host, D-Palm. Follow me on Twitter at DPalm66. Follow the show on Twitter at UDPod. If you're going to talk about the show on social media, please use the hashtag UDPod so I can find you. And thank you for the shout-out. Follow the entire MTR Network at the MTR Network on Twitter. Your one-stop shop for comics, gaming, TV, movie reviews, politics, and, of course, now, sports. We'll be back later this week with the full NBA Finals preview. I, of course, am going to throw in a little hockey talk because that Game 7 gave me life a couple nights ago. That was your show. This is your outro. See you guys next week.